This is a truly fantastic game, full of instructive moments that we can all learn from. But first, we've got to set the scene. So back in the World Rapid Championships 2021, a 17-year-old Nodirbek Abdusattorov from Uzbekistan just came out of nowhere and blew away the field. He beat Magnus Carlsen, world champion, and then went on to win the whole tournament, defeating Jan Nepomniachtchi in tie breaks. So here in 2022, when the most recent World Rapid Championship was played, Magnus was looking for revenge, not only wanting the title, but also he had a personal vendetta against Nodirbek, and they met in round 4, early doors. Magnus with the white pieces here, going super aggressive, trying to get at Nodirbek's king, but would it backfire or could he break through? So let's see what happened. He kicks off here with b3. Now this is known as the Nimzovich-Larsen attack, although recently you see a ton of this from Hikaru, especially online. Now we see e5, so the classic move, trying to immediately blunt that bishop on b2. Bishop b2, knight c6 defends the pawn, and now e3 is the other classic way to continue development. We see knight to f6, knight f3, pressures this pawn, and if black kicks on, well, the knight can find a square here, and you're opening this diagonal now for the bishop, so it's not ideal. So instead the pawn was defended. Now this move looks a bit weird, blocks this pawn, but black wants the castle, rook e8, tuck back the bishop, so that's the harmonious way they're going to unravel here, as we'll see. So Magnus goes c4, and now I'm highlighting the pawn structure because this is a Sicilian structure, but with colours reversed. Castle's now from black, d3 from Magnus, so this is the kind of Scandinavian pawn structure, very hard word to say by the way. Now rook e8 defends the pawn, and after a3 from Magnus preparing some queenside expansion, we see a5 clamping, bishop e2 develops, and this one drops back. Frees the way for the d pawn. Castles from white, pawn d5, going for that kind of open Sicilian play. Magnus captures, the knight takes back, and now this knight hits d2, and I'm highlighting these pawns because this setup is known as the hedgehog. Kind of looks like a spiky hedgehog. The pawns are only on the first 2 ranks there, or first 3 ranks. The piece is behind, but there's a lot of latent threats in the position for white with this kind of structure. Are you going to go b4, d4, prepare something else on the king side? There's some really nice attacking ideas in the wings. So f6 from black just bolsters that diagonal, supports the pawn. Queen c2 from Magnus, and now bishop f5, a more unusual looking move. Normally you'd expect that bishop on e6, cover the weakened diagonal, but from here it attacks this pawn a bit more aggressive, and it sets a trap. If Magnus had gone e4, looking to win a piece, well then the knight hops to f4, the newly weakened square, and after captures here, captures with check. This is better for black, better pawn structure, better game. So of course Magnus doesn't do that. He goes rook fe1, covers the bishop, prepares e4. So this one now drops back, and now this is where Magnus goes super aggressive. So he could play a more standard move, like pawn to h3, rook a to c1, coming to the open file, but he wants to go for it, and he pushes on here with pawn g4, gaining space, looking to rip open the g file. Now queen d7 was played, attacking this pawn. How is Magnus planning to meet this? Well, he now goes king to h1, and oftentimes you see king h1, rook g1 first before this push. There's some famous Fischer games. So why has Magnus done it so prematurely, you could say? Well, there's tactics in the air. If black takes this pawn, now there's a discovered threat from the bishop, as I'm drawing on the board here. So you can now take on e5, the queen has to move, you can chop here, pawn recaptures, and then you can actually force the queens off the board. No time for the black queen to take on f2, the knight's hanging on d5 here in the centre, so takes his best, pawn recaptures, white's got the central pawns and the bishop pair doing well. So you don't want to be capturing this pawn. Instead, Nodirbek, he centralises his rook. And now Magnus hops in this knight to e4, wonderful move, freeing his position, and this is one of the points of g4, it clamps on this f5 break, you can't now kick away that knight so easily. And if you take here, by the way, just to note, well then the pawn recaptures, and actually this is good for white. You're picking up the bishops, you're kicking this knight away from its central square, you've opened the d file to share it with black, there's no weak pawn on d3, you've closed this diagonal towards your king, etc. Just not a good move. By the way, one thing I want to note while the board's gone grey here, so this is actually a chess.com feature. When you're analysing in this tournament game view and you want to keep the clock times on the left hand side, the only way to do that is use this view, and then when you switch to analysis it changes the colour of the board. So I can't actually change that if we want to keep the clock times on the left. So just a quick side note, because I've had a lot of comments around that one. So after this one here of knight to e4, we didn't see bishop takes, king to h8 played. And now Magnus centralised the rook. He didn't have to do that one straight away. He could have started with rook g1. And now we see bishop f7 just hopping back, eyeing the b3 pawn, rook g1 from Magnus, and knight b6. Great move from Nordibek. Opens the bishop. This rook comes to g3, prepares to double on the file, and now a4 generates the counterplay, and you want to go b4, keep things shut, etc., but then you're running into bishop b3, skewering these two. Not good. Black would be winning. So instead, Magnus now plays takes on a4, and now the knight comes to a5. You don't normally want to put your knights on the edge of the board, but this opens up the queen to support the knight to recapture the pawn, so that's why it was played. Magnus now doubles the rooks, and now here Nodibek goes slightly wrong. He should actually take this pawn immediately, that's his best line. But he centralises the bishop, looks very logical, coming down this diagonal, but it just gives Magnus a little bit of extra time whilst Nodibek's not generating this queenside counterplay. And he kicks on, no time wasted, pawn g5. Now Nodibek here, he goes f5. It is the best move, but it's a double-edged sword because now you're opening up this diagonal towards your own king. Yes, you drive the knight back, but there's a lot of attacking ideas in the air for white now. So this bishop's hit. The pawn is also defended twice now. So it drops back to c6. That's the third black piece attacking this pawn. Magnus can't save it, so he turns his attention back to the centre, back to the king side. Bang, he goes pawn e4. He just shuts down this diagonal from the bishop. Now black could kick on here with pawn f4. Nodibek didn't do this, but it doesn't kill the attack for white because the rook can come to g4, and then there's ideas of rook h4, pawn g6, various attacking motifs, the knight coming to g5, so the attack could carry on even with pawn to f4. But Nodibek instead, he takes on a4, he turns back to the queen side, Magnus captures, bishop takes, but the queen now finds a nice home on c3. Hits that knight, it comes back into the game, also covers this pawn, and now g6 from Magnus, he carries on ripping open the king, and Nodibek doesn't go pawn h6, because if you do this, knight g5 is very dangerous. That pawn's actually immune. If you capture it, you're ripping open this h-file with deadly effect. King goes, and then the rook can take here. And it's all about this pawn just clamping the escape square. The bishop's also in the way. And these threats of bringing the rooks, doubling, everything like that. There's also issues down this diagonal in a lot of lines. Is just unstoppable. It's about +5 here for white. You can see the eval bar on the left. So we didn't have, after g6, the pawn coming to h6. Instead, knight d4 was played, looking for counterplay, hitting here, especially the undefended bishop. But what do you think Magnus Carlsen played here in this position? And it's a brilliant move, double exclam, when you run it with the game analysis tool that chess.com have. So Carlsen played knight to g5, leaving an entire bishop on prise and allowing these heavy pieces to be forked. Now Nodibek's best defence here was technically rook e7, but white remains better. But he played the more natural, knight takes on e2, and now we see knight f7 check, queen c4 also strong there, technically stronger, but this is still a good continuation. And now we don't see the king stepping to g8. The problem with this is queen c4, and here you've got two attacking ideas. One is down this diagonal, moving the knight away, delivering mate, and the other is around taking here with check, queening the pawn. So say you take here with check, rook recaptures, and then you try and block the diagonal, well this is where the other motif kicks in. You take with check, king takes, you swap the queens, then you make a new one, and this should be winning for white rather. But coming back here, king g8 wasn't played for that reason. Instead we see takes here. Now the pawn recaptures. Nodirbek wins back the queen on c3, but Carlsen wins this rook. Now the bishop takes back. Bishop takes on c3, and Nodirbek just goes wrong. He should have used some of his time here, because his best move was bishop to c6, a really important idea, using this weakened diagonal. And even though you're in exchange down as black, there are definitely chances here, because Magnus can't take on f5 anymore. Now you can take on e5, but then the rook could capture here. This is one sample line. Rook recaptures, really nice tactic. You take with check, and this is the resulting position, where yes, white is better, but okay, you've still got to prove the win. But what we see in the game is bishop to g6, very natural to try and blunt that diagonal here down the g file, but now Magnus takes, decoys that bishop, and picks up this one on e5. And Nodirbek just collapses now. He really overlooks the threat. So there's a big one here to simply take on g7, and you have to stop that. Bishop g6 is one option, rook d7 is best, laterally covering here and here. But what we see in the game is bishop takes on d3, and now Magnus simply crashes through on g7, and here Nodirbek resigns the game, because if that one's recaptured here, then we come with the rook, and these discovered threats are deadly. So if you try and move the rook away, for example, hit the bishop that's about to give that deadly check, well then you can step away with check, the king can't move, so the rook has to capture, rook takes, and this is a simple matter of technique, especially for the endgame wizard, Magnus Carlsen. So Magnus gets his revenge, and if you want to see another stunning game from him, then check out the video on screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.